Coming up, does the Nets cap space put them in position to acquire even more draft assets this summer? I'll answer that after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, I'm going to be joined by NBA salary cap expert Yossi Gozlin to talk about why the Nets are in an advantageous position with their cap space, what teams could emerge as trade partners, and what return fans should be expecting. But before that, I want to just set the stage for the position the Nets are in with their cap space and what it means and how the new CBA, the overall landscape of the NBA, is making it even more advantageous for them. And the Nets are the only team with cap space this summer. I think that's been beaten to death. They're projected to have anywhere from 40 to 60 million. It depends on how they handle some of their own free agents and own roster decisions. But they're the only team to have it. And we've seen Sean Marks in the past, in his first time rebuilding this team, use that to his advantage with salary dumps, with other teams who need to shed money, taking on those unwanted contracts into cap space in return for other players or draft assets. We saw him do this several times back in 2017. He took on D'Angelo Russell alongside, he took on Timofey Mozgov and got D'Angelo Russell alongside him in a deal that sent Brook Lopez and a first-round pick to LA. He also took DeMarre Carroll from the Toronto Raptors into his cap space and got a first-round pick alongside Carroll, who actually became a valuable veteran for that 2018-19 team that made the playoffs. But this time around, the NBA landscape is even different, and it's because of the second apron, some of the penalties that are being enforced against these teams who spend. And I think a lot of people who are watching this probably know what the second apron is, but it's a threshold that's set a certain level above the salary cap and luxury tax. There's a first apron and then a second apron. And depending on which one you go above, there's, penalties that are enforced for this. And the reason that the league put this into the new CBA was really to dissuade teams like the Nets, like the Clippers, like the Lakers, these big market teams who have really deep pockets, who are just spending and spending and spending into the luxury tax year after year. It's really dissuading those teams from doing that. And it's kind of trying to level the playing field and add more parity to the league, which we're seeing now, with the Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder and some of these other teams. And just, there is more parity in the league now because of this, because these big market teams can't just keep spending and spending and spending. But because of this, teams need to shed salary. A lot of the teams who are, spending a lot or in that second apron need to get out of it because there are these penalties, such as if you're in the second apron, you can't aggregate contracts and trades. You can't use trade exceptions that you got from prior years. You can't sign certain buyout players. Your first round pick 7 years out becomes unable to be traded. It's frozen. So all of these penalties make it really hard to keep, team building if you're in the second apron, especially if you're in it for multiple years. If you're in it 3 out of 5 seasons, your first round pick 7 years out actually gets bumped to the end of the first round. So I doubt we'll ever see any team reach that point where they're doing that. But the point is, all of these penalties make it a lot different to team build. It makes it a lot more difficult to trade and to do certain things. We're seeing that with teams like, the Phoenix Suns were stuck in the second apron. It limited extremely what they could do trying to build around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, then bringing in Bradley Beal. That further limited them. They're still there, one of the teams that we're going to talk about. But these teams that are in these positions are going to need to get off of some money. And the Nets, being the only team with cap space, are in a position to, leverage that and use that to their advantage by, potentially getting some assets. What assets? That is to be determined. But coming up next, I'll be joined by Yossi Gozlin to break down what teams Nets fans should be watching out for as trade partners this summer. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. Guys, are you looking to redesign your patio this summer? Maybe your style leans more towards clean and modern. You'll love being able to filter and find exactly what fits your space and budget. The delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with larger items. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Now, I'm joined now by Yossi Gozlin of the Third Apron on Substack and YouTube, noted salary cap expert. And today we are here talking about the Nets and their salary cap space, which has been a popular topic entering the offseason, and then potentially weaponizing it to take on some bloated contracts in return for some draft picks. And I recorded an intro talking about the Nets, the leverage they have, being the only team in the NBA with cap space this offseason. But I wanted to kind of determine with you, how much leverage are the Nets going to have in these negotiations with these teams? Because if they're the only team with cap space, when these other teams are trying to shed salary, are the Nets their only recourse, or will they have other ways that they can look to get off those contracts?
So as far as, how much leverage they're going to have, it's very hard to answer right now. I guess we'll just have to see how much, how badly these teams need to save money. There's like a handful of them, like roughly a third of the league, I could see really needing to reduce their tax penalty or try to get below the apron and create some flexibility for other moves. But we saw last year there were more cap space teams. There were about like 7 of them, and only like Oklahoma, Philly, and Orlando used their cap space to try to get better. And then the other teams like Utah, for example, there's like a couple others, Detroit, mainly used it to take on some bad money and try to get some picks back. But none of these trades really turned into premium first-round picks or anything like that. It's mostly second-round picks to take on one, like expiring money, but then also money that's not that big. And oftentimes they had to give a valuable player back to get the value. Like when the Pistons took on Tim Hardaway and they got 3 seconds, they didn't get a first, and then they also had to give back Quentin Grimes. So it's hard to say. And now there's only one team. Yeah, it's the Nets. They're going to have the cap space. And like there's the Pistons, maybe the Grizzlies, maybe, but it's probably just going to be the Nets. I guess we'll just have to see what the market is. But as far as to your other question, the Nets aren't necessarily the only way. They're not like the gatekeepers of, hey, like you want to save money, you got to go through us. The new CBA has changed things where, because of these restrictions, and that makes trades a little more difficult. Like if two teams over the apron want to trade with each other, it's not really possible. You just got to get a third team involved. And I think that's where teams are getting around these restrictions. Just try to get a third team involved. And Nets will very often be those third teams. But like the Celtics, for example, I did a whole mock offseason showing how they could save a lot of money, even get below the tax without having the Nets involved. And it's just as simple as having a third team involved that has enough flexibility below the apron, below the tax, to take on some extra money. So instead of the Celtics, trying to take back a little bit less, you have another team taking back some of whatever that package is. So I want to say the Nets should be able to get something. I would probably temper exactly how valuable the draft picks could be or what kind of player they could get back, just based on last year and some of these other factors I'm explaining. They might not get a whole lot, but we'll see. I could be wrong.
We'll get more into the price and what could be a realistic return for some of these things, but there are going to be several teams who are, needing to shed salary and get under the second apron and open up some financial flexibility. From your projections, what you have in terms of the financials, who are the top teams that Nets fans should be looking to? who will be looking to get off some contracts and open up some flexibility?
So the biggest obvious one is Boston and Phoenix. Those two teams, if they go into the season with what they've got, they're looking at $500 million teams. And I don't think either of those teams are going to be looking to spend nearly that much. So those are the two big obvious ones. Also kind of in that realm, Cleveland. And that's another team that I don't think enough people are really talking about what they're going to do. There's a lot of rumors like maybe Darius Garland's available. I'm not really taking that too seriously, but they're going to need to save some money. They're way over the second apron as well. It's like a nearly $400 million roster. I don't think they really need quite the depth they have. Like maybe they could move Jared Allen now. Maybe they want to consider moving Isaac Okoro, who I think was linked to the Nets last year. So that's another team. So those are the three big ones. So have you thought about any of those ones?
Yeah, well, I was just curious. I mean, I think Boston's the one that everybody has been, referring to of like Jason Tatum's hurt. They can't justify being in the second apron right now. That'll have ramifications for their 2032 first round pick if they were to stay in it through this season. So they're an obvious one of like, there's not desperation or somewhat desperation, I guess you could say. When you talk about Phoenix and Cleveland, how would you, rate the level? Like, would you say it's almost a foregone conclusion that those teams are going to get out of the second apron or not?
I would say Phoenix is a little more likely just because they were awful last year and they could probably save a good amount of money in a Durant trade if you could expand that. Because they're roughly, I want to say they're probably going to cut Micic and Caleb Martin. Once they do, they're going to be like they'll actually be pretty close to the second apron, like maybe $7 million above. In that case, all they really need to do is a Durant trade and they can easily get below it then. I guess the bigger question is, do they want to try to get closer to the tax because they're still spending a lot of money for a team that missed the playoffs last year? In that case, okay, maybe the Nets do need to get involved again. Both teams have traded with each other quite often in the past few years. So maybe there's something that could be done there. With Cleveland, it's mostly just me speculating because we just don't know exactly what the appetite is to spend just now. We know that based on how much they spent a lot of money on the second LeBron tenure, they had like one of the biggest tax penalties up at that time. I just don't know if they want to spend quite this much. They'll spend tax. They'll spend a good amount of money, but maybe they just want to get below the second apron. That would save them over $100 million or so. So that's where I'm looking. Maybe they consider moving Allen, Okoro. Those are just some logical guys, but we'll see. I guess time will tell to see what the line is for them.
All right, coming out of the break, we'll talk about the potential return for some of these deals that the Nets could be looking at and who are the specific players that these teams could be looking to get off of. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. Look, guys, I had a bunch of friends looking for tickets in New York for these Knicks playoff series. They seemed impossible to get. They went to the Game Time app, and Zone Deals were offering 60% off in great sections. They loved that they could see the exact view before buying, no surprises. The app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 apps, and you're done. And with the Game Time guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 100%, 110% of the difference. The NFL schedule also just dropped, and you better believe I'm already looking at my fall calendar and picking which games to hit. Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You'll find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. If you've never used Game Time to grab NFL seats, now's the time. It's seriously a game day upgrade. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Coming back from the break, talking with Yossi Gozlin, NBA salary cap expert, about the Nets potentially taking on some salary dumps, accruing some draft capital, and the specific teams who could be in those positions to be trade partners. We touched on the Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Phoenix Suns. It sounds like Boston and Phoenix are the two teams that specifically Nets fans and whoever NBA fans should be looking at. Let's focus on Boston first. Obviously, the names that have come to mind when it comes to Boston shedding salary are Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. Porzingis is on an expiring contract, whereas Drew has 2 or 3 more years left on his deal, both around a similar number, like around $30 million. Of those two, do you think Porzingis is the more likely one to be, kind of shed to a team like the Nets?
Out of everyone they have, if they're talking about doing a straight salary dump, yeah, Porzingis would make sense for both teams. That would cut Boston's total expenses in half if they just got hit off his $30 million. And for the Nets, you're only taking on 1 year of him, and they'd still have a decent chunk of cap space left to do something. But I think the question is, if you're the Nets, you got to get something worthwhile to make that happen.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
You spoke about the price. You spoke about the price, like these teams who took on some different things. The Pistons used, for example, and it was only second round picks. They even had to send out another player in a deal like that. When you talk about Porzingis and the position the Celtics are in, and whatever leverage the Nets do have from being the only cap space team, is a premium, whatever you want to call premium, is a good first round pick a realistic ask for taking on that last year Porzingis' deal?
I think if you're the Nets, that's what you want to make it worth your time, all the trouble. If you could get like a future pick, because the Nets aren't going to want any more picks this year, especially if the Celtics have the 28 and 32 to offer. I don't think that's going to help. But if you're the Celtics, does it really make sense to trade future picks right now, given all the uncertainty? I don't know. And that's where I think no matter what, these trades are most likely going to involve multiple teams. And whether it's Brooklyn getting involved or completely other teams, as long as there's interest in these players, which I feel like there still is, like I'm sure you could find plenty of teams that are interested in Drew Holiday. I'm sure you could find a team that is interested in getting Porzingis as the player he is, with the possibility that you can then extend him at a much lower amount. That would probably be baked in to any acquisition of him. It'll just be the more you expand the trade, okay, the more likely each party gets what they want. And maybe then there's something where, let's say the Nets were taking on Porzingis, maybe instead of getting something valuable from the Celtics, they can get something from another team. I'm not sure what the other team is getting, but it'll be a little more complicated. Based on what we saw last year, I just don't see teams really willing to trade like premium picks just to get off, it's just to get off big money. And mainly like for the Celtics and Porzingis' case, it's expiring money. Maybe there were more, but like the one trade I recall last year were the Suns, they traded a 2026 first to get off Nurkic, and he had 2 years left on his deal. So it's just a lot of uncertainty. It's really hard to say. We're not going to really know what the market is until the first trade happens. And
is your feeling that there's going to be some trepidation or hesitancy from these teams to give up first round picks in deals like this? Is that a product of the way, first round picks are being valued in this new CBA? Do you feel like there's kind of a heightened sense of protection over these picks due to them potentially having more value in the way teams are building now?
I think that definitely plays into it. Now there's, more parity, and so more teams seem to have a better chance. But then equally, some teams that you would expect to be a contender has an equal chance to slip and maybe even miss the playoffs. I like to look at Memphis as a recent example where they did that Marcus Smart trade on draft night of 2023, they traded their 2023 pick, which was already like 25th overall, and then the Warriors pick in 2024 to get Marcus Smart. That trade didn't work out for them, but they kept their own first round pick, which at the time you'd probably think probably the opposite, that the Grizzlies pick would be less valuable, and they ended up having so many injuries, a jaw suspension. They got the 9th pick. And then you look at this season, they were looking at, being a top 2-3 seed for most of the year, and then they dropped all the way to 8th. So they ended up trading their pick, but it went from being like, maybe 25th to 18. So I think teams are definitely trying to be a little more careful now about trading future picks, because it's just so much easier for something to go wrong and your pick to have much more value. When you look at that Tim Hardaway trade again, I actually came up with that structure and I posted on a video last year, but I had the Mavs sending their 2025 first round pick. So that's like a pick in the future. Imagine if the Mavs did that. The have like a lottery pick right now. That trade would look a lot better for the Pistons. So
yeah.
If you're the Celtics, especially, we don't know exactly how they're going to be. There's probably a lot of they're probably going to try not to trade any future picks. And in that case, we'll have to get creative, and so
in that framework,
I don't know exactly how much the Nets can get in that scenario.
Yeah, in that framework, if the Celtics are trying to pull it off without trading a pick, they'd have to find a team that has some level of interest in Porzingis, and him potentially being a positive asset, which I think some people seem to have discounted the possibility of that being the case with Drew Holiday. It seems like I saw a report that saying the Celtics want a first-round pick back for Drew Holiday in a trade, which seems pretty ambitious to me, given the fact that he has the longer contract. He's a little bit older. I don't know how realistic that is. So the Celtics are going to have to get off of one of those two deals. It seems like the Nets have the cap space, whether or not they're going to be able to find another team that views those contracts not so negatively, that they'll be able to, extract some value and avoid giving up a pick. That remains to be seen. Let's close it out talking about Phoenix, a team that obviously has ties to the Nets, and Nets fans always have some level of interest in as a trade partner in the past. When they're trying to get off, they're trying to get out of the second apron. Bradley Beal's like the monstrous contract that everybody talks about. Is that he has a no trade clause? You'd have to get him to waive that. But what are the vehicles? What are the players that they could be looking to shed to kind of create that flexibility?
So first, there's a Kevin Durant trade. If you're doing a 2-team trade, then at most the Suns can save like $10 million. When you look at what the other team has to send out at a minimum, which is roughly like 10 million less than his 54 million. But when you start to expand the trade, let's say you get a third team involved, okay, maybe the Suns don't take back one of these players, that goes to a third team, and maybe they could get a pick back instead. And now you're looking at saving, maybe half his salary amount. So that's where I get into how these 3-team trades, like the more you expand the trade, the less trades you could do, because when you look at the Suns roster, it's super top heavy. You've got the 3 guys making 50 million, and then you've got Grayson Allen making 17, and then Royce O'Neal making 10. So unless you could find the Beal trade, which it's probably very unlikely that happens. It doesn't seem like they're going to trade Booker right now. Then Grayson Allen would be the next piece, but he's got 3 years left on his deal. So that's going to be tough to move without trading a valuable pick.
And what picks, what do the Suns have to trade? Like, what are they looking at in terms of their future assets? I know that they've traded pretty much everything they can. I think they have some of those picks they got in that Utah deal. That was like the 3-for-1. They took like the 3 crappy first-round picks for the 1 good first-round pick. Would it be one of those, what you're potentially looking at them offering?
They could trade their 2028 first round pick, and I believe I think that might be it. Maybe they could trade another pick, but based on all the picks they've traded, maybe they could trade one more. I'm not sure. I want to say it's 2, but they're all going to be like, pretty low picks most likely based on the language of those picks. So On one hand, it's not a lot for another team to take on this type of money, like a Grayson Allen, but at the same time, for the Suns, that's a lot to give because they only have like 1 or 2 picks left to trade. So
Exactly.
that's the other factor. A lot of these teams, like the Suns, like the Wolves, like the Mavs, just Denver, they are so leveraged in terms of how many picks that they've already traded that even if they want to do some type of salary dumping trade, they might not have the picks to do it, and then like whatever picks they have, they're way more valuable to them right now because they're so short on them. So that's the other aspect, that teams have just gotten so kind of reckless with the way they've been trading picks in the last few years that now it's starting to impact the market to do salary dumps. Again, we'll see. Maybe the teams are willing to trade these valuable picks to do it. But just based on the behavior we saw last year, teams just trying to do seconds to move picks, I would guess it's going to be something closer to last season if I had to guess how it plays out.
And I talked last week about a rumor that Nets Daily put out. I had him on my show about the Nets potentially working a framework to move up from 19 in the draft to 9 or 10 with the Raptors or Rockets. And the framework of that was they trade Cam Johnson in 19 to go up to 9 or 10 while also taking on a bad contract from one of those teams. So not even talking about those teams specifically necessarily. You can weigh in on the likelihood of that if you want, but another way that they could be, looking to take advantage of this cap space is maybe you don't get a future first round pick, but maybe they have them having 19, 26, and 27, maybe you eat a contract and you're able to move up a few spots into the late lottery or something like that. Is that something you could see as feasible?
Yeah, so I had when I did my Nets offseason discussion, that's basically where I kind of settled in terms of what is the more likely avenue the Nets use their cap space. I think they'll either try to get a future pick, ideally in even numbered years, because all their surplus picks are in the odd numbered years in the future. But if that doesn't happen, you already have 4 first round picks and a second. Or maybe 2, I don't know. I think, or maybe just 1, I don't know. But they have already so many firsts where I think their best use, and they'll definitely do this to some degree, is using their cap space to agree to deals where they take on some money and they're able to consolidate some of these picks for higher ones in attempts to move up as high as possible, or maybe have 2 lottery picks like you just mentioned. So I think they should be successful to some degree in moving up in the draft. I guess we'll just see what exactly that entails. Who knows? There's just so many ways that can happen. But that's the other element, is that if you're now, I was kind of curious, like what is their veterans value, like Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, because during the season it felt like the Nets would like to get more picks for them. Now with the draft a couple weeks away, now it might seem like their value could be tied into moving up in the draft. Along with consolidating some of these lower picks and taking on bad money. So hopefully they can move up substantially, maybe even get up to like the top 5 for all that to be worth it, because it feels like the Nets are going to somewhat kind of lose the value proposition if they have to do all those things. So they better get like some very valuable picks for that to be worth it.
Okay, we'll see how it plays out. Yossi applying some pressure to the Nets to get a good outcome in the draft there, but I really appreciate you taking the time, man. Always good to hear what you have to say about the Nets' potential salary cap situation. If you guys don't already, go follow Yossi's stuff at the Third Apron. Does a great job with all that. Going to be a lot of action leading up to the draft, and maybe we'll circle back and have more talk about it.
Sounds good. Anytime.
That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the information. Hope you enjoyed the talk with Yossi. And I appreciate all of you for tuning in and supporting the show. If you do not already, be sure to like, comment, subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But I'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.